A lot of good news. The Grizzlies just keep getting good news, and Jaren Jackson Jr. is progressing. Ziaire Williams is progressing, and the Grizzlies are handing out money like they got a money shooting machine. Everyone's getting paid on the Grizzlies right now, and guess what? Season predictions are here. Me and Joe Mullinax here to dish all of that in this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I'm one of your two co-hosts here, Damichael, beat writer at the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, joined by the main man himself, Joe Mullinax, my esteemed partner here, former site manager of Grizzly Bear Blues.
Shucks.
How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing well. You're going to make me blush. I'm going to turn the screen red for all of our YouTube viewers, or if you're listening on any of the various ways to listen on podcast platforms, you might be able to hear my rosy disposition through the earbuds flowing into your cerebellum. You're just making me feel special on this episode, Michael. I appreciate it.
He's smiling like, that girl said yes to him in sixth grade.
That's right.
When he gave her that Valentine's Day card. But thank you guys for joining us here today on Locked On Grizzlies. We do appreciate you joining us each and every morning, making us one of your first listens. And be sure you can listen, you can watch anywhere. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube. Locked On Grizzlies is everywhere, just like the air. So make sure you're tuning in to all the content. We will have you covered with so many special things going on throughout this upcoming season. That starts. We're a day away. That starts tomorrow.
It's Christmas Eve. It's Christmas Eve, Damichael.
It's Christmas Eve, and I tell you what, Joe, there's some exciting things going on. We talked about Brandon Clark's contract extension. We talked about all the money movement and things going on. All these players getting contacts. Tyus Jones, being resigned. John Morant extension. John Conchar extension. And Desmond Bane is the whale lurking in the water right now. So everyone's getting paid. And
almost everyone, like we talked about on the last
almost
time.
Everyone. Almost everyone. But the good news just keeps coming, Joe. And I think we've done Jaren Jackson Jr. updates, but one of the most progressive things we've heard happened yesterday from Taylor Jenkins when he told the media that Jaren Jackson Jr. is about 2 weeks away, and he used the word hopefully. So it sounds like he's trending in the direction of 2 weeks away from participating in 5-on-5. Before we talk about, this, I want you to understand with the Grizzlies, 5-on-5 contact are the main two things that they want to cross off the line for players before returning to play. They've worked Jaren Jackson Jr. into some drills, into some team reps from time to time, but they haven't kind of overloaded him yet.
Right.
So he's slowly getting incorporated into more and more, and now we're talking about being a couple weeks away from 5-on-5. Joe, what was your reaction?
Smash the over. That was my reaction. Smash the over. I think it's 48.5, depending on the site you go to. Smash the over. If Jaren Jackson Jr. is back by Thanksgiving, which, given what Taylor Jenkins said, you're exactly right, Michael. That is what they're most focused on. Can you handle those live reps as close to game speed as you can get? Because obviously there's no replacement for game speed. But if he's 2 weeks away from 5-on-5 work, assume they keep him in that for another 2 weeks. This is the October 18th, 2022 episode of Locked On Grizzlies. If we're being cautious, Damichael, and we say a month, that's still a heck of a lot sooner than a lot of us thought this dude would be back. So if he is back and the Grizzlies only miss him for 10 or so games, smash the over. This is a team that's going to win well over 50 games if they get Jaren Jackson Jr. a vast majority of the time. He is at worst their third best player. You could easily argue their second best player. And even easier than that, he's their best two-way player in terms of the impact he can have on both ends of the floor. How versatile he is. He is a matchup nightmare for opponents. If he is back in the next month, smash the over, because they're going to jump over it potentially by March.
Yeah, it's and the schedule at the beginning of the season, right? It's weaker. So that's another reason why this is encouraging. And I use the weaker term lightly because I also mentioned in the past that the Grizzlies start the season playing 3 games in 4 nights, even though they all are very winnable games. Conditioning this early in the season is still something that you have to monitor. So you're probably going to have, some slower games and some unexpected results from time to time early in the season. But getting Jaren Jackson Jr. possibly back, before December or early in that stretch when people were saying, oh, will he be back for Christmas? Once upon a time is huge. I think this team is progressing in all the right directions. I think Santi Aldama looks really good, but at the end of the day, there are some glaring holes that will be covered up with the return of Jaren Jackson Jr. The backup power forward spot is still up in the air. No one has really just taken a firm hold of it. You've seen signs from David Roddy, Jake LaRavia. They even threw Xavier Tillman, a senior, in there a little bit into that conversation. But overall, it looks like once Santi Aldama is relegated to that bench role with the way he's played in preseason, then you throw Jaren Jackson Jr. in the starting lineup. Joe, you got some things working.
About. And again, Santi Aldama as a starting word makes you a little nervous, or at least it should make you a little bit nervous. Santi Aldama as your reserve for, I think we've seen enough from him this preseason to suggest that he can compete at that level on a night in, night out basis and be productive. So if it's Jaren Jackson Jr., Steven Adams, Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark as your 4 bigs, that's pretty tough. And obviously Brandon Clark, newly extended, he'd probably get more minutes than Aldama. But give me all the Santi Aldama minutes that are like 14 to 16 a game as opposed to a larger role. I'm not sure he's quite ready for that. But it just makes the roster more balanced when Jaren returns. And obviously it helps out a lot knowing that Ziaire Williams, who I know you talked about as the day went on there at Grizzlies practice, Ziaire also being back in the mix helps with that balance, because I know we're going to talk later on in the show about things that were, excited, things we're concerned about. I've talked about it before on this show where I'm worried about who's going to score the basketball for this team that's not a starter. And Ziaire Williams is the most logical answer. Yet it seems like, Damichael, things are trending in the right direction for Ziaire as well. Even more good news for Memphis today out of practice.
Yeah, I mean, it just kept flowing. We haven't seen, Ziaire in a while, it felt like, but he was at practice. And he was off to the side. He had on a black mask. So that was notable as well. But Taylor Jenkins said after practice that the mask was because in the past couple of days he had been dealing with a non-COVID illness. So they were very precautionary without working him into the practice, for one. And then also there was the point of, him getting his wind back and things like that. But sure, the knee soreness is still a thing, that has not completely went away. They say he's still day-to-day there. And I think, his status is still up in question again, because 3 games in 4 nights to start the season, and you have a player dealing with knee soreness, even if it's, very minor, you just want to be very careful with that, because it's an 82-game season. And, these first few games won't matter as much as the last, 5 to 10 games or so forth. So you have to think about things in the long run. But at the end of the day, encouraging sign, Ziaire Williams back at practice, just being around the team and doing some, work off to the side.
Big positive. And I think that it's important for this team to continue to build upon those immaculate vibes that I like to half-heartedly be sarcastic about, and how the vibes are so tremendous over at the Memphis Grizzlies facility. But that culture that has been built, they've put a lot of sweat equity into it, right? Going all the way back to the drafting of Morant in 2019. They have taken the time to build this thing up. and they're starting to reap what they've sown, right? It's harvest time for the Memphis Grizzlies. And these guys are approaching a title contending window. You know, there's a lot of broad strokes in terms of what Memphis is capable of this season. Tom Ziller, who's a writer, who I respect a good bit, has a newsletter that goes out every day. And in his Western Conference predictions, I know we'll make ours here in a moment, he had the Grizzlies as the 1 seed. So the Grizzlies are getting more national attention and publicity and respect than they ever have before, despite the fact, as I've said to you and everyone else that'll hear me and listen to me and read me, they don't act like a contender in the front office. They don't. And yet here they are. It makes it all the more impressive from that front office that is drafted so well, the coaching staff that has developed so well, and most importantly, credit to the players that have busted their butts to put themselves in a position to be this young, this talented, and yet still have this level of hunger for more success than they've already had, overachieving each of these last 3 years. It's impressive to see.
It is impressive to see. And, you know, they're keeping the core guys together, and, you know, just everyone that they've signed, extended, and everything is going to be a crucial part of the things that are going on with this franchise going forward. So we're going to talk more about the Grizzlies, but we're going to talk about season predictions coming up. With me and Joe are going to give you some of the things, the ceiling, the floor, and everything in between with this Grizzlies team. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about LinkedIn, because these days, every new potential hire, it can feel like it's high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. Well, that's why you got to go check out LinkedIn Jobs. See, LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and free. See, look, me, as you know, a podcast host, as a sports reporter, and all those things in between, with my job, I'm always on the go with who can help us out at the commercial field, who can help us out here. And LinkedIn gives you simple tools like they screening questions, make it easy to focus on candidates with the right skills and experience. You need it. It's very helpful. And especially with small businesses, LinkedIn Jobs is the #1 delivering quality hire versus leading competitors. So look, this is what you got to do. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So all you have to do is post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Again, all you have to do is post your job for free. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba. So the Grizzlies, 56 wins last season, Joe. Tied a franchise record. Now the question is, what would they do for an encore? You know, I wrote my season preview story that you can check out at commercialappeal.com. And in my story, I kind of started off saying, look, the element of surprise is gone now.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, when John Morant does some of these dunks, and when you beat the Lakers, you know, last season when they beat the Lakers, it was a big deal. When you beat Golden State in the regular season, you know, it's going to send a message, but no one's going to be on Beale Street jumping for joy.
Right.
It's a different theme around here. The word championship is being thrown around. So, Joe, let's get into the season predictions. You know, let's start with a ceiling and a floor for this team. What do you think is the ceiling and the floor for the Grizzlies this season?
Well, do we want to start positive or negative? Do we want to be highest to high or lowest to low first?
Let's start high on this one, and then we'll start low on our next segment.
I agree with Tom Ziller, who I mentioned in the first segment. I think the ceiling for this team is the 1 seed. A lot of things have to go right for that to happen. For example, Jaren Jackson Jr. returning within the next month. That would be massive for that goal to come to reality. But look, this is a team that returns a vast majority of the key contributors to last year's 56-win team. DeAnthony Melton deserves more credit than I think some Grizzlies fans give him for what he did for that regular season team. But it's not like he was one of their best players. He logged the 5th most minutes, but a chunk of that was because of Dillon Brooks being out as much as he was. Now, in theory, if you're assuming health, you've got Dillon Brooks, you've got John Morant, you've got Desmond Bane, Steven Adams, you've got good health reports on Jaren Jackson Jr., Tyus Jones, Brandon Clark. These guys are still in the fold. And yeah, I'm nervous about John Conchar. I'm nervous about one of these rookies being that 10th man. But you're getting down into the 9th and 10th guy before you're genuinely concerned about what they're able to do. They're going to play 12 to 14 minutes a game. So your core guys are secured. They're in place. They like playing together. They're young. You don't have to worry about load management, which is something that's going to hold back the Warriors and the Clippers from being in that mix. The Phoenix Suns, if Chris Paul plays more than 60 games, I don't know what I will do. I'll be super surprised because so many of these teams, including the Lakers that you mentioned with LeBron and Anthony Davis, folks like to point out how many, games those two have won together when they're both on the floor. The key is when they're on the floor, right? LeBron is getting older. He's probably going to get some load management treatment. Anthony Davis is already on the Lakers injury report. So I think that the ceiling for this team, if the older teams in the West that a lot of folks have in front of them, understandably so, don't take the regular season as seriously, we have evidence of the Memphis Grizzlies taking it seriously. And I could see Ja Morant and company openly saying amongst themselves, we are going to prioritize being the 1 seed because that means the people have to go through Memphis. They got to go through us, and they got to go through FedEx Forum in order to get to the NBA Finals. I could see that as a realistic goal for them, and they have the talent to back it up. So the ceiling for me, Damichael, is the 1 seed.
Yeah, and I'll agree. I think that is the ceiling with this team, the 1 seed, and for some of the same reasons. Depth. The Grizzlies have a lot of depth, and one thing you have to consider in these things is injuries are a part of an NBA season. Injuries will happen. Which teams are best suited to handle injuries? We've seen the Grizzlies play without Ja Morant and be able to succeed at a high level. We've seen them play without Dillon Brooks and be able to succeed at a high level. We've seen them in preseason without Jaren Jackson Jr. That story is still being written, but Santi Aldama looks more than capable. Desmond Bane is the one guy who I would say is probably very irreplaceable in those, kind of same aspects. But we'll see, how that turns out if he were to miss any time as well. But I think they're in a good spot there in terms of being able to handle injuries. Whereas a lot of those teams you mentioned, Steph Curry goes down, the Warriors look drastically different. And the Clippers, are still very good without Paul George or Kawhi Leonard, but there is a drop-off there as well. And, Chris Paul, Suns, Devin Booker, Suns, etc. The list goes on. The Grizzlies, to me, have proven that they're one of the teams best equipped to handle those things. And you pointed out something else. Quite frankly, what I learned about Golden State last season, they don't care about seeding. Right. They don't. Golden State just basically prioritized health going into that last stretch, and they didn't care about the 2 seed, 3 seed, or the 4 seed, and they ended up the 3 seed, and they were very healthy in the playoff runs, and that's why they won, that NBA championship. While teams like the Grizzlies, had Desmond Bane back injury flare up, and Ja Morant's injury, and things like that. So they prioritize health over there. Going over to the Clippers, that's another team who I think could care less about seeding. Kawhi Leonard, he's going to sit out his games here and there because, Kawhi Leonard is
load management.
Yeah. So once you factor in all those things, I think that is the best case. Now, switching on over to the other side, I'll say play in. I mean, play in is very possible with this team, and it's not just the Grizzlies. I was talking to Joe earlier about how I've seen predictions where the Pelicans range anywhere from a 1 seed to 8-9. I've seen the Timberwolves range anywhere from 1 to 8-9, and you can make a case for a bunch of other teams as well. But with the Grizzlies, the only thing that I could see them falling into that 7, 8, 9 range, it would be the fact that 1, injuries, and then 2, they just get passed up. You can make an argument that the Pelicans, the Timberwolves, along with the aforementioned teams, the Suns, the Warriors, the Clippers, and Nuggets, that's 6 right there. Those 6 pass up the Grizzlies. That would put them in the 7, 8, 9 range and put them into the play-in conversation where they'd have to play their way into the playoffs.
And I don't even think you've mentioned Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's stacked, Joe.
It's a gauntlet.
It's a gauntlet. So I think at the end of the day, they still can be a 47, 48 win team. but this is one of those years like, you know, the 05, 06, 07 Western Conference, or I think it was like 2012, 2011, when you had everyone won, or 2013, 2014, everyone won 50 games, 48 plus. This is one of those years, Joe.
I would agree completely, and we're on the same page here. I think the floor is the play-in. I don't see them falling out of the play-in, because if you look at the Western Conference, there's 11 teams for 10 spots, right? The 4 teams that pretty clearly aren't going to be in that mix unless something remarkable happens. The Spurs are actively trying to not be in that mix. Same thing with the Jazz. You can make the argument the Thunder are trying to not be in that mix, but the Thunder started 6-9 last year. And I think that they might be in a similar spot this year where they do better than expected, and then maybe they start their tank. SGA, you know, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, oh, my leg, it's sore. And then the Houston Rockets, you know, they might be trying to be better, but they're just so young, it's going to be really hard for them to be able to take that leap in a Western Conference. It's going to be stacked. So every night's going to be a battle almost. And I do believe that if injuries happen, as you alluded to, I think that it's possible that, you know, I mentioned in the first segment, and I've said it lots of times, you know, the Timberwolves have acted like a contender. You know, before they were a contender, they made a trade to be a regular season force with Rudy Gobert joining the fold without them losing, you know, a key player like Jaden McDaniels, I believe, of the Timberwolves, that star big wing that they've got. Their front court is massive. They're 6'10", 6'11", and 7 foot in that front court. So you have the Pelicans that made their big trade for CJ McCollum last year, Zion Williamson returning. So there is a lane where Memphis is that 7 or 8 seed, and they still win 48 games or so. You know, they're right around that line of the over-under, but they are in that play-in conversation just because of how loaded the Western Conference is. So the fact that you can realistically argue for them as the 1 seed, and then there's also a possibility of them potentially being the 8, that's just tells you what the Western Conference is going to look like among those 11 teams. You know, the Sacramento Kings and the Portland Trailblazers, I'll believe it when I see it between one of those two, especially the Kings. But the Kings have given Memphis fits in the past, and they should be better this year, and they're actively trying to make the play-in. So I think it's going to be a really fun Western Conference race because it's so wide open. You know, even teams like the Clippers are a squad that have a lot of questions. Everybody's got questions going into the season. One of the teams with the least amount of questions, ironically, is the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah, and thank you, listeners, for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen every day. And I'll make sure your second listen is game to game, because every moment, every top performance, and every result, Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA in the Western Conference with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. So follow Game to Game on Locked On, and it's available everywhere, but it's available on Odyssey, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, you can find it as well. And guess what? We got more to talk about here. We have more to talk about. We're talking season predictions. Now we're going to get into things that concern us and the things that are the least concerning before we get into some bigger, broader picture NBA predictions coming up after the break. So, Joe, we mentioned, you know, the highs and the lows there. We're gonna reverse it this time. We're gonna reverse it. We're gonna start with the thing that's the most concerning, and I'll start it off here. And for me, it's the shooting. I think shooting is the number one concern. This is nothing surprising or new to anyone who's heard me talk about this team. I think the transition scoring and all those things will still be elite, but at the end of the day, when the Grizzlies have to get in the half-court offense, I think the transition scoring goes out of the window. You need three-point shooting. You need guys who can create, and I have not seen a lot of those guys on the roster. I was actually listening to some media day, context from Zach Kleiman earlier, where he was actually saying, look, we know half-court offense and shooting are two of the biggest things we have to get better at. And he talked about addressing them through the draft and things like that. But the thing is, with those guys, they're not expected to play 15 or more minutes. So at the end of the day, a lot of the growth will have to be internal. And I don't know if we've seen enough to trust that yet, Joe.
I would agree. And that's the reason I've clamored for a trade, right? I sound like a broken record. But they haven't done that, and they probably won't. So they're banking on internal investment. And again, in fairness to them, they have been pretty successful. I keep using the term heat check. This is their heat check. This year is the heat check of their development system, and they've earned that opportunity. They've been so successful. I would say the thing that I'm most concerned about, Damichael, outside of the shooting, I think that's a very good pick. And my previously stated not making that move for a guy is exactly what you mentioned in terms of health. You know, people like to pick on the Denver Nuggets, for example. And why are people picking the Nuggets to finish in front of the Grizzlies when Michael Porter Jr. is such a health concern? Jamal Murray is coming off of a serious injury. Jaren Jackson Jr. is not the picture of health. And Ja Morant has missed significant runs of games for multiple years in his career. And he plays a style that even if he's added some tricks to his bag, and it looks like he has from the mid-range, he's still going to take contact at the basket. He's going to. That's just what he is best at. You know, you can't make a zebra change his stripes, so to speak, and you're not going to have Ja Morant all of a sudden becoming Steph Curry. That's not who he is. He is going to get to the rim. He's going to take on contact. He's going to fall awkwardly at times. He might do it less, but there's still going to be those chances for him to take on some bumps and bruises. So I think it's health for me. You know, obviously Tyus Jones has been brought back in part for that when it comes to Ja, but Jaren Jackson Jr. is a different animal. You mentioned Desmond Bane, who might be the most irreplaceable of the Grizzlies. Doesn't mean he's better than Ja Morant, but in terms of what Bane brings to the table, if shooting is your major issue and so much of your shooting acumen is located in one dude, and all of a sudden he's gone, who's going to fill those shoes? I'm not sure anyone on the roster can. So they are deep, but at the same time, they are still very much dependent on certain players, Desmond Bane perhaps being number one, but obviously Morant certainly would be a part of that. Jaren Jackson Jr., of course. If they lose someone like Bane, and there is evidence that, you know, he's not perfect in that way, none of us are, but he was banged up in the playoffs. You lose Desmond Bane, that directly impacts those areas of half-court offense and shooting where teams are going to be able to beat up on you a little bit more. And you mentioned earlier the not surprising people anymore. I think that's extremely important to keep in mind too. The idea of, you know, the book is out a little bit on blitzing Ja Morant off the dribble, off of screens, right? Like there's been more and more tape being accumulated on how to slow down the transition Grizzlies. Not that they can do it all the time. Ja Morant's one of the top 10 players in the NBA, but I think another year of experience playing against him could lead to defenses being a little better prepared for what he brings to the table, not assuming that Ja hasn't already addressed some of those things and adding layers to his game, which perhaps he has.
So switching the tone here, we're going to talk about the things that are the least concerning. What are you least worried about? And for me, Joe, it's the defense.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people say, oh, Jaren Jackson Jr. is hurt. The defense is going to start the season off to a slow start. And I'm like, this is, have you seen this system that Taylor Jenkins is employing here that is season after season after season, they've gotten the most out of guys who aren't necessarily great individual defenders. And now you're talking about Ja Morant being more engaged defensively. And, you know, that's one of your best players. Well, that is your best player. So the fact that he's engaged, there's a trickle-down effect there. Ziaire Williams takes another step defensively this year. People are talking about how much he's improved. Taylor Jenkins loves John Conchard's defense. So that kind of helps improve, you know, the bench defense there. And Jake LaRavia, David Roddy, those guys have been progressing well on that end. You have more depth to play around with. I think the defense is one of the most solid things. You know, even with Jaren Jackson Jr. missing in the starting lineup right now, Santi Aldama doesn't block shots like Jaren Jackson Jr., but what we've seen in preseason is Santi Aldama will get to the rim or he'll get to that weak side, and when he puts his hands up, he may not block it, but they know that a 7-footer is standing right in front of them, and he alters shots. So that's almost as important as a shot block. And you know, there he may not be as strong and things like that, but I think overall the defense is in good standing.
I would agree with that. I think that's a good pick. The thing that I'm least concerned about, and I made fun of it earlier in the show here, the vibes. The only thing that would truly surprise me at this stage, like injuries are going to happen. You're exactly right about that. And I think that, they could come out and say Jaren suffered a setback, and that wouldn't surprise me. What would surprise me is if there was a locker room fight, right? Like stuff that has happened to the Warriors, stuff that has happened to the Suns, the drama that is surrounding several of these organizations. That would not happen in Memphis, or at least I can't see it happening because of the way they built the franchise. And that's a credit to Kleiman, Robert Parra, the owner, Taylor Jenkins and his coaching staff, and the players. They genuinely respect each other. They enjoy being around each other. I don't think folks fully understand, which is kind of funny, Damichael, because we all work jobs, right? It's very rare to be in a working environment and like almost everybody you work with, right? That's just life. Like me and you in our jobs, that is something that doesn't happen every day. And the Grizzlies have discovered that on the professional stage. It's not fake. It's organic. I wrote about when I was at Grizzly Bear Blues, the idea that Memphis might be lucky enough to have lightning strike twice. And Grit and Grind was very organic and real. And I think that what this next generation is very organic and real. It doesn't have a cool catchphrase yet that, maybe Tony Allen needs to come up with one for them. But it doesn't need a catchphrase. Like if you cover the team like you do, like we do, if you follow them as a fan, that they genuinely care about one another. They like to be around each other. And a lot of times, as cheesy as it sounds, that can cover up some holes in terms of how well you play on the floor. Maybe not once you encounter championship contenders like Golden State, but in the regular season, on a random Wednesday night against the Houston Rockets, sometimes the vibes can help you win out. So I'm least concerned about them continuing that Grizzlies culture because they have so much invested in it. They have built it. What it means to be a Memphis Grizzlies player, these dudes did it, and they don't want to tarnish that. So, Dylan Brooks notwithstanding, and I still think Dylan is a major part of that being built that way. I would be shocked. I'm least concerned about what this team is identity-wise in terms of playing with and for each other entering the 2022-2023 season.
Yeah, it's a great point because over the course of 82 games, you're going to have, some disgruntled, players at certain times and things like that. I think back to when I first joined the beat last December when Ja Morant first got back and the Grizzlies were playing out of their minds while he was gone. And he gets back and they lose to Oklahoma City, a team that they beat by 73 points. And your supposedly best player gets back and you lose to them. And he kind of struggled. But, it was when he first got back and Ja was kind of down on himself, and you had some, he mentioned that some fans were saying some things to him that, got to him a little bit. So you have those moments over the course of the 82-game season. But I remember in that moment seeing Desmond Bane and other players come out and say, no, that's our best player. He's going to be fine. And next thing you know, Ja Morant turns into an all-NBA player and becomes one of the best players in the NBA, all-star starter, etc. So that's a good point on your end there. But speaking of all NBA and all these things, Joe, season awards, right? What do you have in mind, in terms of not just the NBA season awards, but we want to talk in the frame of the Grizzlies here.
Sure.
What would the Grizzlies players be best position, or even coaches be put in the best position to be candidates for we're talking about most improved, which Ja Morant is the reigning most improved award winner, MVP, which we've seen. Some people have Ja Morant as their MVP, in their predictions and things like that. But then there's Rookie of the Year. Grizzlies have 5 rookies. I mean, long shot, but they have 5 guys. And Defensive Player of the Year, we're talking about Jaren Jackson Jr. Getting back a little bit earlier than anticipated. So he could be someone who factors into that conversation, or a guy like Dylan Brooks. Joe, how do you see it playing out? Where can the Grizzlies be impactful in the season awards?
Let's lightning round this, okay? I think that the third most likely, so it's 3 to 1. 1 will be the most likely award. Number 3 is Ja Morant as the MVP. I think that is possible, but I think Luka Doncic exists. I think that you've got other players like Giannis that are going to be in that conversation. Ja's health, again, hasn't been sterling. So Ja Morant stays healthy. I think he's a top 3 to 5 candidate for the award. We'll see. I think that it's possible, but not, as possible as the other two. Number 2, I think Coach of the Year for Taylor Jenkins. If they are that 1 seed in the Western Conference, it's Taylor Jenkins is number 1 with a bullet in terms of winning the Coach of the Year. It's going to be in large part because the development hit another home run. If they're the 1 seed, that means John Conchar is hitting threes at the same percentage that he was before at a higher usage rate. That means that these rookies are contributing in a meaningful way. It means Santi Aldama is contributing in a meaningful way. Ziaire Williams maybe is in the 6-man conversation. So I think that's my 2 is Coach of the Year, Taylor Jenkins. My 1, and I'm a bit biased because, I love him, Desmond Bane, most improved player. I have gone on the record as saying I think Desmond Bane is going to be in the reserve all-star conversation. I think that Bane is going to take another leap. You've seen it in his game. His facilitation, his passing off the dribble looks a ton better than it did last season. And he wasn't bad at it last year. He just looks that much better. He's still elite from 3. He's getting to the basket. He's got a nice floater like Tyus and Ja have working at the moment. I think Desmond Bane is primed to have a massive year as that number 2 to Ja Morant offensively. So Morant at MVP is number 3 for me. Jenkins is Coach of the Year. I think Desmond Bane as most improved is the most likely result personally.
And I'll add this. I really don't see the Grizzlies being super as tied into the seasonal awards as they were last season. Last season there was the surprise element. But when you think about Desmond Bane, for me at least, in the most improved conversation, I think it's, look, he improved so much last season. And, like, how much more are we expecting Desmond Bane?
Well, we said the same thing about Ja Morant. He won the award.
Yeah, I mean, Ja went to a completely different level. And with the athleticism,
I see what you're saying now.
Yeah, okay. It's hard for me to see Desmond Bane just turning up 26 points per game. Next year. I mean, it's possible. I can fill it up now. But
Klay Thompson. Thompson-esque.
Klay Thompson's done it. Yeah. So with that being considered, and then Taylor Jenkins, he was a top candidate for this award last year. I just feel like, Coach of the Year is going to go to one of those less heralded guys, this season, because you have a lot of surprise teams who can, impact some things this year. But Taylor Jenkins will be involved. The one guy who I think has a really good shot is Ja Morant with the MVP award. The hype is there now. The attention is there. The national TV games will be there. And if he stays healthy, he has looked improved enough on the defensive end where I think the advanced stats, when you talk about MVP, a lot of people get into, defensive win shares, defensive, and all those things. Ja Morant, if he improves in those areas along with the offense, you're talking 27, 28 points per game with two-way potential. It's and the Grizzlies being one of the top 2-3 seeds in the West, I think he'll firmly be in that conversation. So that's where I'm leaning with it, Joe. I think Ja Morant is the one who has a really good shot. And plus, can't forget this, Joe. He is mentioned time and time again. I've heard him talk about the fact that All-NBA, it's on his mind now. He's not going to say it in public too much, but it's on his mind. Ja Morant has that escalator in his contract where he could go from, I believe it's 192 million, all the way up to 233 million dollars.
It's not chump change.
It's not chump change at all. We're talking a $30 million, $40 million jump here by making an all-NBA team. So he's got a lot of money to play for, and it's on his mind because that comes out to approximately $8 million or so plus per season. Well, we appreciate you guys for listening to Locked On Grizzlies. We have one more episode before we get into the game coverage of things going on. The next episode, as you won't be surprised, we're going to talk about us previewing the first game.
Yes, thank goodness it's back. Damichael,
it's back. It's back in the New York Knicks, and I'll tell you what, they looked improved to me, Joe. But we're going to talk more about that on the next episode. Before we get to that, though, thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. But now, go make Locked On NBA your second listen, because the season is here now. We are here tonight. You get the Golden State Warriors versus Los Angeles Lakers. You get some good Western Conference basketball right there. And look, our local NBA experts and insiders have you covered on and off the court all season long. All the biggest stories. And like I always say, the thing about Locked On NBA is you get it all in 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. You get the whole scoop around the NBA in about 30 minutes. And of course, this is important to you as Grizzlies fans because the Grizzlies are one of those teams now. So you need to be tuned in to what's going on with Locked On NBA. Joe, it's been a pleasure to do this again. Now we're getting into the season coverage. We're going to talk the nuts and bolts on tomorrow's episode, this meeting against the Knicks, who's going to be available. And we'll get one more press conference and practice update from Taylor Jenkins and Ja Morant and that group ahead of that game. So we'll mention some of that in the episode as well. But thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies and making it your first listen. We appreciate you. Make sure you continue to like, comment, subscribe. We look at your reviews. We look at your comments. And until then, we'll see you next time on Locked On Grizzlies.